Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Fragility Exhibition and Events. I'm Christopher Schutte. I'll be moderating the discussion today. I'm the Art Experiential Director for Particle. Today, as you noticed, we have a new format called Kaleidoscope. This is brought to you by Particle. It's a live streaming conversations aiming actually for more community-led discussions and looking for more transformational outcomes by this connecting between communities. So we welcome you also to subscribe to the YouTube channel. We have quite a lot of content that's been built up around the Fragility exhibition. So talks from moderated by ICA, Fondazione ICA Milan, Culturit, the network of students from different universities and even Bocconi University. And so before we start, a quick word about the project. So Particle's vision is actually making art and culture more immersive. It's more inclusive and more closer to people. This exhibition has been a digital exhibition mainly due to the circumstances, and it's an ongoing exhibition still online that you can go and visit. We've actually created this whole exhibition with a series of distinguished contributors, artists, curators that have all played a fundamental role with, I would say, special thanks to the embassy in the Italian embassy in Malaysia that has helped support this effort, and all of the other partners that include Fondazione ICA, Benini, Magazzino Italian Art, and many others. So why Kaleidoscope? So first of all, we can see that over the past year, I think there's a strong message that that we're not separate, but yet we're not the same. No, so never in modern times has the whole world been affected by such a global experience where we've all kind of come together and realized that we're all somehow connected. So we realized that we're kind of all swimming in the same ocean, yet we're not all on board the same vessel. Some of us have yachts, some have canoes, and there is a sort of interconnectedness that we're all experiencing and that we're living, but we're all living and experiencing this in slightly different ways. So the format of Kaleidoscope is actually this conversation, this kind of these symmetrical patterns that are emerging as you're rotating and pieces of glass are coming out when you're using a kaleidoscope. We're trying to do that similarly with the format today of Kaleidoscope by experimenting with these multiple points of view and actually formulating kind of contacts between distant communities, offering ever-changing points of view. So this whole idea of rotating around certain arguments and having one central common theme to come together around. So today, the central theme that we're going to be discussing is art and empathy. And for a last practical thing, we'd like to invite all of you to interact with us and ask questions to the guests. In particular, if you want to ask a guest directly, write to a guest, and we'll try to get you in touch with them. There is a QR code in Slido, so we'll show that. So you can actually use your grab your phone and click on the QR code, open up Slido, and type in this number, and you can actually interact directly. You can also interact directly through YouTube, and we can see those questions directly inside the broadcast studio. So with that, I can just also tell you a little bit about who's here today. We have Ling, a curator from the exhibition. She was a guest curator for Fragilita. So welcome, Ling. She's also sorry. There's a problem with the microphone, so we will.
Okay, here we go. Okay, here I am. Yes, unmuted. Hi, Chris. Thank you for having me today.
So, and we'll come back to you. Just to, actually, let's for now. Let's start out. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the exhibition, in particular, why you believe that art can promote empathy, and even if we can take it one step further, the artists that you've selected, what is it in particular about their stories? There's a lot of strong messages in the stories that they're bringing, things like displacement and loss. What is it we can learn from them, and what is it we can actually approach as far as being empathetic for these particular artists you've selected?
Well, I mean, Chris, when you think about artists and their work that they make. You know, artists are witnesses to their time. In the creation of their art, they're most times conveying messages about a state of mind or how they're feeling, or they're making commentary about particular periods or experiences in their lives. And I think some of the most powerful outputs of this creation and expression comes in the form of work that is cathartic, where in the making of work, the artist is really trying to come to terms with or better understand their own personal circumstances or struggles. And I use the word powerful because more often than not, the works that come out of these challenging periods in an artist's life are often charged with very emotional energy. And this energy is what sort of is transferred, I think, if that's a good word, to audiences when they're confronted with a work of this nature, when they encounter the work. Perhaps they might question, or they might try to understand a little bit more about why the work was made in this way. So in the selection of the 4 artists from Southeast Asia, I mean, obviously, we really wanted to work with and focus on 4 quite different artists who are approaching this idea of empathy through their work in many, many different ways. So as you said earlier, like, for example, Anida Yoali, she's Cambodian, Cham, Malaysian, American, and she's living in America, but she was born in Cambodia, and she's a very, very important Cambodian artist, I would say, if you look at contemporary Cambodian art today, simply because a lot of her work deals with how, as a child, she was displaced from her country of birth, and she was relocated to America with her family after what happened in Cambodia, very sadly. But then when she came back to Cambodia 30 years later, she was able to sort of, she was trying to navigate and negotiate where she stood as a Cambodian American person. So that sense of displacement was there. But that's just one example. And then we've got Anu Rendrajagadeva, who's Malaysian, but his work was sort of really dealing very much with what's happening now, which is the pandemic, you know, and how artists are responding to this time. And through his work, he's really speaking about or commiserating with how the people in the arts are perhaps not given the support that should be given to them in a difficult time like this. And then, of course, through Wang Chi-ming, it's a very personal type of work where he had an accident and his eyesight was compromised. And his work really sort of deals with that because he wears glasses, and when he puts on his glasses, he starts seeing the world in quite a different way. So in his work, you have 2 sets of glasses, and you can see things through different sets of lens, a blue lens and a red lens, and then you see your world changes. And finally, we have Virginia Singh, again, a work that was made during the lockdown. And it's a video work, but it's very sort of more, it's talking more about the silent struggle, and perhaps we are encumbered. We think we are powerful, but we are actually encumbered very much by, we're actually really quite fragile in as human beings.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, there we are. Sure. One of the things that I think is present in all of those works that you've just described is this idea of dignity, and that we're actually embedding ourselves. We're actually, through empathy, we're actually entering into the stories. All of the artists I think you've chosen have a certain story that they're telling us about their lives, and we're able to enter into those stories. But this idea of actually being able to provide a lens where we can actually see the dignity of other cultures, other people's stories, and try to remove the barriers and obstacles that prevent us from seeing that dignity in their personal stories. What can you say about that? What can art do to allow us to take away those barriers?
I mean, you know, I don't think there are actually really, I don't see any real barriers in art. I think the language is quite universal. If anyone here has interacted with the pieces that I've mentioned, you will see that I think everyone has got would have a different takeaway. Obviously, everyone's perspective or what they feel when they're confronted with an artwork is different. And look, this is the thing, because with art, really the sense of empathy would obviously reach out to different people depending on how they react to what they see visually. Because I mean, art is a very visual, sensory thing. So if you're talking about the dignity of these artists, and I mean through their work and what they're saying, I said earlier that it's cathartic, and when you talk about really difficult, when you go through something very difficult, or someone's experienced a very traumatic or tragic experience in their lives, I mean, we try to commiserate as people. I think we try to look and try to, we think, oh, that's, it's a terrible thing that's happened. But we would never really truly understand the true magnitude of what anyone else is actually feeling or what they're actually going through. But I think through art and through the stories that these artists are trying to, or the messages that these artists are trying to convey through their work, it just provides entry points or segues into their practice or their frame of mind. And if there's even and just sort of a small inkling that they take away from them in understanding what these artists might have felt, then I think that already in itself is half the battle won, isn't it? I mean, in terms of empathy.
Okay, perfect. I think this is a perfect segue to introduce also Kenneth Feinstein from Sunway University. He's an associate professor at Sunway University in Kuala Lumpur. So I think we can kind of jump off from Wei Ling's comments about art being a medium, a very visceral medium, and it's able to take away these barriers that we feel in daily life. That we can actually, the artist will connect to us in a different way. So we can use and leverage this medium to really empathize with their stories and see new points of view. So what can you tell us about that from the first of all, Kenneth, just a basic question. What do you see as art and empathy? How do you see these related?
Well, I mean, empathy is, I mean, it's fundamental to the human experience. We learn through seeing other things, trying to relate to them. It's how the brain works. And, and empathy is about is our ability to put ourselves beyond our physical body. And art is a way of trying to communicate that. Also is taking us away from our own physicality and relating to other forms of physicality, other ways of seeing things and other forms of physicality. So that's kind of where these things turn together. I mean, but also we have to remember that art can be, it isn't confined by any of these things. We can make incredibly unempathetic art if we want to. We can make art that can be challenging in an emotional way that we can relate to, but we can also make art that can be very offensive if we think that that's important. Art is about creating something that we have to relate to in some way.
Yeah, this is a perfect. Can
like a response. Yeah, no, I agree.
Right. That brings up this beautiful topic I wanted to bring into the conversation is this cultures of relationality. How do we create these spaces where people can actually have moments of sharing and relate to the art, relate to each other? What is the best way to sort of create these environments where we can actually, because this is one of the things that can help kind of heal the crisis and actually people's personal stories. It's one of these things that brings people together. So we can create those right characteristics in space or right connections between people. One of the things, Kenneth, you brought into the discussion we had on Fragility Talks was the good intentions of companies like Facebook, putting individuals together to discuss, but yet it doesn't always go as planned. So how do we control the media better? How do we create the context for these experiences?
Well, the people who create the media are the people who control the media. We may be able to add content to the media, but to a certain extent, we either have to subvert the media, we have to find ways to either subvert the media, or we have to acknowledge that we're just part of their system and their way of doing things. And if we want to subvert it, we have to be very conscious of what they're doing and how they're doing things to be able to understand how to undermine it. I mean, the nature of most of these online technologies is to be collaborative, is to be conversational, but we also have to make sure we acknowledge who controls the conversation.
Hey, Ling, can you riff on that a little bit? In your personal spaces, in your gallery space, how does it happen? How do people relate to each other? How do they connect in front of art?
Well, I mean, obviously, okay, so during the pandemic, everyone's sort of talking about going online, doing virtual exhibitions and so on and so forth. And I mean, yeah, I understand that's quite an interesting space to go into, provided one is able to really get into that. I mean, like Dr. Ken, putting on that I'm getting all the information, the terms wrong, but putting on those going into the AI and experiencing the exhibition as if you were in a 3D in that virtual space, right? I mean, unless you have the time to sort of go in and do that and navigate that quite smoothly. I think the physical experience, obviously, there's nothing that can take away from that. Being in front of an actual artwork and seeing it and feeling it, there's nothing quite compares. So yeah, I mean, to answer your question, Chris, I think that the traditional format of going into a gallery space and being in front of an artwork still sort of reigns superior in a lot of ways. However, what I will say, I mean, in relation to what we're discussing, I think that having entered the Fragility and Fragility exhibition, which is online, bit physical but yet online, I do think those interactions are quite interesting because people felt, okay, so they were navigating an exhibition online, but at the same time they were prompted to be able to respond to certain artworks. They could ask questions, or they could rate how they were feeling, or they could put a response to something. I mean, I think that interaction was quite lent a new dimension to the viewing experience, because sometimes when you do go into a physical art space, unless you've got a curator, you've got a docent or somebody walking you through the exhibition, or so it might be a little bit difficult to truly really navigate an exhibition if you didn't know what questions to ask and so on and so forth.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of experiments going on. Things like Burning Man, the Sundance Festival, the Metaverse. They have $1 billion investment that they've just secured over the last few weeks. So there's quite a bit of investments pouring into this virtual world. There is a bit of a contrast still, because the resolution and the granularity of emotion and the behaviors you can have in the virtual environment are much different than those in the physical environment. And I think there's a lot of exploration that still has to happen to bring it up to the same level. We have a specialist with us, Angelo LaRocca, so we can also bring him into the conversation at this point and talk about even the exhibition. Digital Attitude was a partner in designing the behavioral tactics and some of the ways that we could give people tools to empathize and express their emotions inside the exhibition. So he's here to talk about new forms of leadership and also empathy that we've embedded into the exhibit, but also this sort of the value of being able to identify and know which emotions you're experiencing, be able to actually share those with other people. Once you can identify them, then you can actually work with them and you can actually understand yourself better. So Angelo, what is, for you, what can art bring us as far as art and empathy? What does it give to people in an exhibition like this?
So first of all, thank you very much, Christopher, for inviting me. When I was thinking about what I wanted to share with you all, the first thing that I thought and the first thing that came to my mind was actually a quote from Carrie Fisher. And I know I'm talking about a completely different kind of art, but it's art. And she said, take your broken heart, make it into art. So how can you take these emotions that you're feeling? How can you take these things that you're experiencing, this point of view that you have, and how can you share it? How can you make someone else live through what you are living? And that's the fundamental part. That's the fundamental part. I'm a psychologist myself. So the point of view from where I start from is what is going on in people's mind? What is going on in their brain? How can they experience the world in a way that is completely different from the way I am living? And there is another quote. This time it's not that artistic. It's actually from a football coach. He was always like made fun of because he hadn't been a football player before. And one day he said, you know what? You don't have to be a horse in order to be a jockey. You just need to understand the horse. And if you think about it, that's a core tenet of our human experience, because it's almost impossible for a human being to actually experience the whole set of everything that can happen in a human life. If you are a man, it's probably difficult that you will manage to live, for example, what a female lives. If you are born in Europe, it's probably difficult that you will manage to experience what being born in Asia or in Africa or in the US means. So what you need to do when you want to understand other people is start exactly as you were saying, Christopher, start from the awareness. And the first element is being aware of ourselves. So the first point is like, who am I? Where am I right now? How much of the fact that I was born in Italy, that I am almost 30 years old, like how much of this impacts my point of view? How is my point of view made from the experiences I've had? And am I able to understand other people's point of view? There's actually an element that's called the theory of mind. It's a very cool name for a very important and fundamental element in the development of the psyche of a person. So the theory of mind basically says that you are able to understand that other people themselves have a mind and that other people have thoughts. And you are, so it's very much simple. It's just understanding that other people have it. It's not understanding it. It's not being able to guess what they are thinking. It's just what's going on in my head might be going on in other people's head. And there's this test. It's very funny when you think of it, especially like adults, when they think of it, it's like funny, but it's actually something that develops through time. And it's called the Sally Ann test. It's basically like a story of two girls. There's this girl, Sally, that leaves a marble in a basket. She leaves the room and another girl, Anne, comes in and takes the marble and puts it in a box. When Sally comes back, where is she going to look for the marble? So that's the question that you ask. And children, when they are in a very young age, they will reply that she's going to look for it in the basket because that's where Sally left it. And it's right. But at a younger age, they will say that she will look in the box. And it's crazy if you think about it. Like, because they say, if it's in my head, it will be the same in other people's head. So at one point, we start developing the understanding that other people have different points of view. We start developing the fact that other people have a different experience of the world. And that's the point from which we start, or from which we can at least start, because we can start understanding that other people have different feelings, have different glasses. Ling was speaking about before, like about the artist and the exhibition with different glasses. And it's very cool because when I am asked what mindset is, I always say that it is the pair of glasses we use to watch reality. So I wear glasses and my point of view is biased because of the fact that I wear glasses, but other people might not see it that way. So that's the point of view, like being aware. And that's the starting point for every major change, every major emotion that we might feel, being aware of the moment we are living, of who we are, where we are living, and also about the influence from everything that surrounds us.
Yeah. Take it one step out. Okay, if we zoom out and take all of these emotions, people understanding their context, understanding their culture, understanding the lens and the glasses that they're actually seeing the world through. How many people in your experience with your customers, clients that you're working with, knowing that from a science point of view is one thing, but actually applying it in the real world and being conscious of it is something quite different. Can you tell me about that? What's your experience working with different businesses, companies?
It's two completely different things. You know, you are aware of it, but if awareness was everything that you needed in order to like promote change, no one in the world would be smoking. No one in the world would be obese. No one in the world would have these kind of issues that we have because we are just aware of stuff. So the important element is building also the desire and being able to trigger also that desire. And oftentimes it happens through emotions. So through triggering the exact feeling that you want to trigger in other people. And in my experience, it's very common to find people that are aware of where they are. And I'm speaking about people because I work with both individuals, but also with companies. So, and what's a company if not a compound of individuals? So there's also some philosophical elements there. But the important thing here is they may be aware, but sometimes they need a bit of a push in order to move from understanding to something else. You know, there is a big difference between two very similar words, that is sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is just the acknowledgement. I am aware of what you're feeling. I am aware of the situation you're living, and that's it. I'm just aware. But then there is empathy, and empathy is like, I am not just feeling for you, I'm feeling with you. I'm taking on parts of your emotions. I'm taking on parts of your experience, and I am integrating them into my own point of view. And that's very different. That's very difficult also to trigger in people or in customers, so in companies in this case.
I want to bring Ken back into the conversation. We had Matthew also from Sunway University talking about how in a cross-cultural type university like Sunway, one of the best strategies was collaborative projects for actually breaking down any kind of barriers, breaking down the echo chambers, getting cross-cultural collaboration, working together towards a common goal. What other learning strategies can you think of that are helping people become more empathetic? And is art and media and those, are you using tools also by creating art or creating collaborative art projects that are helping?
Well, I mean, one of the fundamental things within creating art and teaching an art, this has been true for well over 100 years, is open critique, is the idea that other practitioners are in a room together, and as we're looking at each other's work, we're talking about it, we're discussing what we see as strengths, we discuss what we see as weaknesses, we have discussions to draw out the ideas behind things. That critique in and of itself, which is fundamental to at least art education, if not the artistic process itself, is an important way of doing this. And well, I'll just stop it there. That's an important part of what we do. I mean, that the process itself should be in and of itself. The nature of all of this is the idea of dialogue. You know, I mean, if we go back to Martin Buber, if we go back to Levinas, we understand that one of the fundamental natures of the human experience is this idea of dialogue as opposed to monologue.
Right. How do we get it more embedded into people's actions? Now, so I think one of the things that Angelo could also bring in, we want to get people into an action bias. And so this whole idea of collaborating, getting them actually in motion,
Yeah, but one of my problems with what Angela was saying is if you say, well, we all understand that cigarettes are bad, and therefore why don't we stop doing it, is not acknowledging that there is an entire industry built around encouraging us to have those cigarettes and to counteract all of that, and how important that is, and the McDonald's out there trying to make sure that we eat the bad food, that it isn't always. There are times with all of this that we can't always say it's the individual's faults for everything and not acknowledge the larger societal structure.
Yeah,
and if we,
I mean, they have managed to get right into the human psyche. I mean, completely. If you think about it. I mean, all of these people, including Big Pharma, any big brand. I mean, Facebook. I mean, all these people, everyone's just trying to get data to just get into our minds, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're.
Yeah, what can you say also about the artist perspective there? I know Anarindra is very active on that front. Are there artist attitudes that can help us be more aware of how potentially we're being influenced or persuaded? You could say it in these terms.
Sorry. Are you saying are there any other artists? Is that your question?
The way that the artists are approaching this, they have a way of contextualizing it for us that helps us understand that potentially we're being led in certain directions. Now our behavior is being, maybe not our own, maybe they're not our own ideas that like Ken was saying, that these are being indoctrinated. What other ways do you see art being able to bring this out in a visceral way, or in a way that we can more experiential, that we can actually almost touch and feel and be more aware?
Well, look, I think, Chris, at the end of the day, it boils down to how an artist is able to convey what they're trying to say. I mean, they're obviously one of the most powerful works of art that I've seen of late was an artwork by Dadang Kristanto. Dadang Kristanto is an Indonesian artist who's very much an activist through his work. So he makes a lot.
Of a connection.
Yeah, I don't know what's happened. I mean, you're saying that, the thing is, we have artists who are propagandists. We have artists who did work for the Soviets. We have artists who did
I get
work
cut off?
for the Nazis.
Totally.
Yeah,
Sorry.
you froze.
Sorry,
You froze.
I'm talking
Go
away
ahead.
to myself. Yeah, sorry, carry on.
No, you continue, please.
Okay. No, so just very quickly. So Dadang Kristanto, Indonesian artist, he made a project where he created 100 life-size sculptures of human figures, and he placed these 100 life-size figures, or larger than life-size figures, in the middle of an area where there had been a fracking incident. Fracking meaning mud had overflown out of when they were trying to get oil and gas. They hit a line, and the whole place overflowed with mud, and 16,000 people lost their homes in that area. So everyone was displaced, and that.
Give her one second.
Yeah, I don't know what. Yeah.
So
now
sorry.
You're
I know
back.
I'm back. So sorry. I was on the internet. Anyhow, just to tell you quickly, and he left those 100 sculptures there for 8-9 months. And over the course of 8 or 9 months, he kept returning to that space and photographing and documenting and videoing what was happening. And over the course of the 9 months, the mud just kept rising. It went up to the waists of these figures, and then eventually to their necks, and eventually they were completely covered. The 100 life-size sculptures were completely covered by mud. They were submerged. Now, as an artwork, that's powerful, because it showed all of us who didn't really quite understand what this meant, that hey, this is what actually happened. over 9 months. And these, this is the severity of what has happened. And it was a call to action. And I think when artists are able to create works like that, they're able to make a change in this world. They're able to make a change in people's lives, and they open our perspectives out. It teaches people that, hey, look, this is what's going on. It makes us aware, creates awareness.
Yeah. Was it a daily thing that he was able to publicly involve and make it participatory, or was it something that he captured over a time period and then shared with the audience? Because I think one of the things we're seeing happening now, there's a transition to more participatory art where you can actually, on a day-to-day basis, provide stimulus or
absolutely
on these topics.
I think this work was maybe about 5 years ago. So maybe our access to things like social media and live stream or Instagram live or all of that was probably not in place. I think today something like that would have created much more of a ripple effect through using social media, of course, and these sort of platforms. But there was a documentary made about it, and so it's powerful. I should really try and share the link if that's possible. I'll share the link and you can share that later if people are interested in looking at it, because it's powerful.
We can share it even to show a quick image of it.
Yeah, I'll look for that.
That brings us to, I wanted to kind of transition to habits, and how do we bring this into, there's many ways to influence our ability to actually create our capacity for empathy. And part of that can be just casual discussions in the checkout line, or keeping a diary, morning pages in the morning, looking to have casual conversations in our daily lives, listening with more appreciation, with curiosity. There's all of these different tactics. Back to Angelo, what do you think are the key things that we can bring in as far as habits to help structure empathy and our capacity for growing empathy in our lives?
Thank you for the question. And before I start, let me say thank you to Ken for the point you made before, because it's absolutely true. And actually, in my work, I said I'm a psychologist, and the proper title is behavioral designer. So a person who actually designs the behavior of other people. And there is a fundamental element of ethics that always has to be considered, because the power we have in our hands is the power really to shape the kind of world that the people see, the kind of information they access. You were talking before about the media, and you said the person who creates the media actually controls the media. It's absolutely right. And we have to apply ethics in everything we do, and at least at our level, at our dimension, we have to do it, because otherwise we're pushing people to behaviors that are not in their best interest, or on the other hand, in the best interest of the society they are a part of. So that element always has to be present. And it also acts as a perfect preamble for the question you asked, Chris. So how can we do it, and how can we do it ethically? So the first element really is to be curious. There is a psychologist, Jodi Alpern, who actually said that, for her, the core of empathy is curiosity. And we were talking about it before. How can we foster curiosity? How can we try and understand a bigger share of the world than it is just our own? It's a daily habit, really. It's a daily habit of asking questions, of being curious about the other people, of listening. And probably that's one of, at least, the biggest issues we have in our world right now. Because listening and actively listening to other people, so just being present when other people are talking with us and not just to us, is a request to stop everything we're doing, trying not to multitask, trying not to check our emails or the messages we got while another person is talking with us. It requires us to be still. And in modern society, it's becoming more and more difficult to actually be still. And I'm not just speaking about physical stillness, because if the lockdown has taught us anything, is that we can be very still physically, but being very active mentally. It requires us to be still, to be focused on the other person. What are they saying? I have a Russian colleague who taught us this saying that is Russian, that is, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth because we have to listen twice the amount of time that we speak. And it's like a nice reminder that we have to really listen to other people, really trying to understand what they have to say, be curious about their life. And on the other side, we have to also admit our bias. When you're a psychologist, when you're studying this kind of stuff, there's always the question, okay, but now that I am aware of it, am I immune to it? Is it like awareness? Is it like a vaccine for this kind of biases? Unfortunately, the answer is no. There is no way of being completely immune to this kind of biases, but you can be aware. So, for example, in a hiring process, you can be aware of the fact that you are being biased in making some decisions, or in a relationship with another person. You can be biased because you say, you have that moment of realization when you stop yourself. And again, stillness is the key. I don't want to steal a book's title, but really stillness is the key. Like, you have the moment when you freeze yourself, you freeze your thought, you freeze what Daniel Kahneman, a psychologist, the only psychologist so far who has won the Nobel Prize, called the System 1 way of thinking, the irrational, the rapid, the instinctive way of thinking. You stop it and you say, wait a second, am I doing this because I want to do it, or am I doing this because actually I am biased? There is something in my head that told me that I need to go in that direction, but it's not something rational, it's not something right. It's just because I think that that person is that way because of X. And that's a way to start doing it. And then we have to keep doing it. That's the other element. You mentioned it perfectly, Christopher. It's a habit. Empathy is not something that is created and will last forever because you create it. No, it's a habit. And just like every habit, it needs to be reinforced, at least on a daily basis. You have to be active on it. You have to be willing to put some time into it every day. And it's not something that requires that much time. It's more of at least talk with one person every day. Ask them how they are. That's a big issue that we're facing right now, especially after the lockdown. The communication between people, especially in the company environment, it's becoming so flat that it's just work related. You completely forget. We are seeing a lot of people who actually forget that they are talking with other human beings. And it's crazy if you think about it. Up until yesterday, we were all sharing an office. We were all drinking beer together on a Friday night. And now I text you just when I need something from you. So it's just that kind of reminder that we're all in this together. We are living the same time. We're living the same period. We're enduring some difficulties together. And I can be kind towards you. I can stop myself and ask you how you are feeling, because I'm interested in the way you are feeling. I'm interested in your point of view. I'm interested in your experience of the world. So even just asking, how are you feeling? Before starting any kind of conversation could be a great catalyst for empathy to happen.
This is exactly what the ambassador, ambassador for the embassy in Italy, in Malaysia, is Maju Pinto, has said. Basically, how are you is one of his things that he communicated. Just really meaning and asking this question, fully, is the first thing he does in his work as kind of the consular services of the embassy in Malaysia. So interesting point. I wanted to bring it back to Ken. You made some discussions on the media, and if we talk about Marshall McLuhan and the media becoming the message, and we're trying to promote empathy through art, what are going to become the best medium? Now we know long form podcasts have taken form, but if we're talking specifically about art, and Ling mentioned it also, the physical part, she's not completely convinced that we can go fully digital without elements of physical now. So, but what are the forms and the media that's going to allow us to give more reflection or more?
It sounds like you're asking for a magic bullet, and there obviously is no magic bullet.
There's no magic bullet, no.
And and in terms of I mean, there's a big difference between creating artwork that's meant to be delivered digitally and creating artwork that's meant to be seen physically and then delivering digitally. Because if you're doing that, it's always going to be lesser than what the actual thing was. And we have to understand that different works and that entail different media demand different forms of presentation. I mean, I don't know. We can't really program empathy in a way. We can't really. I mean, art in a way needs to be something that is in excess of all those things that we program, and that's why it is what it is. It's that it's always too messy and is always trying to do. It's always has the ability to deliver beyond what's programmed. You know, if you read Roland Barthes, he talks about how does photography work and all of this, and he analyzes, let's say, a news image or an advertising image. He always talks about how text is put there because text is limiting. Text is the thing to stop us from actually from reading it as anything other than what is supposedly intended. And that idea of intended of what is supposed to be as intended is the thing that we have to give up. If we want to really have an experience with a work of art, we have to allow it to be conversational. We have to allow it to ask us questions and that we can ask questions back to it. But we have to be able to encounter it in a way that is more about that conversation, that dialogue, as opposed to a programmed message.
Yeah, I see, Wei Ling, you're nodding your head there. It's a bit like text could be limited. It provides maybe some stopping cues if you actually define the perimeters of how you want to create the experience, or what the conversation should be revolving around. But Wei Ling, do you have something to share?
Well, I think, look, I think going back to what Angelo said earlier, everybody, all of us, each and every one of us, we're all individuals. We've all had different experiences. We're all born at different times. We're living in different parts of the world. We've had different education, a different upbringing, different educations. I mean, there's a myriad of things that make us who we are. And so when any individual is confronted with an artwork, let's look at artwork, right? Everyone is going to have a response of some sort. I always ask people when they come to the gallery, tell me how you feel. What do you feel when you stand in front of this work? Give me 3 words. I mean, if it's intimidating for you to say it to me in a sentence or a few sentences, give me 3 words. And every single, if I have one painting and I had 10 people coming by that painting, everyone has a different, just says 3 different words to me. Everyone expresses it differently. So, as you said, it's how you experience it, your first impressions of an artwork, and then the questions that come out from being confronted with an artwork, and then what you ask and how you see it. And sometimes, actually, interestingly, the artist might have a specific reason for having made a work, but then through audience response or through their dialogues with the audiences, they might actually start seeing different things in their work. So you flip around, the person looking at the artwork starts giving something back to the creator. Do you know what I'm saying? Because I think if an artwork is open-ended enough, it's sort of powerful enough, so many people can relate to it in so many different ways.
Yeah, this is what we
but at a certain point,
go ahead.
When the work is done, and who cares about the creator anymore?
Of course.
The work is done, the work is in conversation, and if I know the creator and I give them some feedback, that's nice. But if the creator is dead, who cares?
Yeah,
it's always the dialogue. It's always the relationship with the work.
Correct.
But we're seeing also a transition that work can become more fluid and even live and kind of create a constant dialogue or a conversation around the art potentially through the power of digital or new media that are allowing people to connect from all over the world and discuss certain themes. So that's something that, going back to habits, I wanted to take the opportunity to introduce also Benedetta into the conversation. She's coming from Culturit. So she's also part of the Particle team.
Hi.
And
Hi, everyone.
welcome.
Okay.
So this, we're talking about habits. The Culturit team brought together a whole group of students, and actually involved on the Malaysian side 2 universities, Sunway University and also KL, Uni KL. And the whole idea of habits and habit forming, this whole idea of a diary emerged from discussions both with Digital Attitude and also with the artist, Maria Rapicavoli. So maybe you can tell us a bit about the project, how it was born, and why you decided on the diary format to try to make it more relevant to people or embed it and talk about daily experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I really thought that especially Angelo's intervention before was really close to some feelings we had while working on this project, because as Chris said, we were commissioned a series of talks that should have the objective to bring together students from different parts of the world. In the end, it was Italian students versus Malaysian students, or at least students from Malaysian institutes. And we sat around and we had to find like a format. So the topic was fragility. The audience were students. And immediately we realized that students, myself, but young people in general, don't really like to talk about their emotions and how they're feeling and whether something is being heavy on them emotionally. And it was the same for us. So we were like throwing the ball among each other, saying, okay, so what do you think of fragility? What do you think of fragility? It was an endless circle. But in the end, it was really the collaborative approach Angelo was mentioning. So we literally said, let's not focus on what fragility means for us. Let's focus on what fragility meant for all of us, like as a category, you know, as students. So we tried to interiorize the experience we had during the lockdown, and as Angelo said again, the huge impact that had on our habits. We were like going to leave for exchange programs soon. We used to be living in other cities. We used to be out of our houses 24/7. So that was a big impact. And that's where the idea of a diary came out. So trying to document what kind of areas were impacted the most by this lockdown, and the diary was supposed to symbolize the fact that we rather share those emotions with our inner self instead of like shouting to the world that we're feeling damaged or we're feeling sad. And the interesting part was that in the end we turned out to speak about very, very difficult topic. Let's say, like we talked about fragility of beauty, we talked about fragility of personality, we talked about fragility of language. And it was incredible how from these very broad topics, we were actually able to get to really actual and concrete matters. So the problem of having to express feelings, maybe texting and not talking anymore a lot. So having this very important conversation with people that matter to us, but in distance. So and my generation is more used to text rather to call, and that's a huge impact on how we express, especially, let's say, bad or negative emotions, because it's difficult to take your phone and text to a person, I'm not good, I'm not feeling good. And just to conclude, like, I think that the art that was presented us was a really, really great example of how there exists in the end like different means of communicating a feeling, you know, an emotion. And as Chris said, we were paired up, let's say, with Maria Rapicavoli's work, so we had to analyze it from our perspective. So asking ourselves, what does that picture communicate me? Like those broken glasses laying on a street, what is the symbol of it to me? And each of us could see their family, their weaknesses, their cities, and the problems of their country in depth. So I would say it was a precious experience.
Beautiful. I think we can unpack this. There's so much there that you've just shared with us. One thing is the art as a trigger that Ling was saying before. It's something that can just hit us, and impact us, and on a visceral sense, on a visual sense. So that was already a trigger. The fact of a diary being open to explore something that is private is a fundamental, I think, an underlying kind of clue, kind of a hint to why this works so well, I think. And then also these topics that you've chosen, that the team of Culturit chose: personality, beauty, resilience. What should we protect? Are we protecting because it should be preserved and over time from a conservationist point of view, or is it something to be protected because it's fragile and it's delicate? Looking at language and reality, all of these topics were very, very common and very similar, something that we're confronted with every day, but we're looking at them through a new lens and triggered by the art experience. So what was the experience that you found cross-cultural, the universities, the sharing between Italy and Malaysia that was going on? What was learned in this experience, and how did people interact?
Well, the experience, I think the experience, as I just concluded before, was really precious because we had the chance to be connected with people, with unknown people. My generation was used to travel to get to know like unknown people on the streets or at the bars or at the hostels and in traveling. So I really, also talking with the team, the feeling was the same. So the feeling was finding ourselves in a room, so with people that we didn't talk before. So the Italian guests and the Malaysian guests just met right before the conversation, let's say 10 minutes before. And there was this weird feeling of, okay, so I'm not sure I want to talk about my feelings with strangers. But then, of course, we prepared a sort of canvas, a sort of like structure of topics. But what was interesting to see is that actually the conversation arose quite naturally, and arose especially when some of the parties, some of the guests brought up an uncommon topic. So I can think of the language episode when there was this girl that said she spoke like 6 languages, and the Italian speakers were like, I barely speak English, and then I'm trying to speak Spanish, and you speak Chinese, Malaysian, and Arabic language, and English, and French, and so on. So what I think that the real value of that encounter was in highlighting differences that were instead like similarities, because we feel the same way. We in the end we have the same kind of boundings and emotions despite the experience and culture. But as the other guests were saying before, the experience and culture we live in like make us see things a little different, but in the end like the feeling is the same. I don't know if I can communicate I
think it's fantastic. Now, art is something that actually brought people together, gave them a kind of common platform, which was a good starting point, kind of broke down any kind of barriers. And then people were able to actually share and understand the topics that were very near and dear to them, and actually immediately start into a conversation without knowing each other before. So I think from that point of view, it was extremely successful to actually identify with people from another culture, speaking different languages, as you mentioned. I think it was very successful as far as an approach and a strategy. So looking maybe at Angelo, what's your view listening to this? Is this something that you see as a success, something that you could actually apply maybe in organizations or in personal coaching?
Absolutely.
Something people can grow from. It's something that could be a trigger.
Absolutely.
Art is in this way.
There is one element when Benedetta was speaking that struck me. There is one fragility that she didn't mention, but I think it's like the base fragility that we face and we are afraid of probably when we don't want to speak about emotions, especially negative ones. There is the fragility of the ego. What are other people going to think of me when I share with them these feelings I'm having? How is their perception of me going to change after I have expressed this kind of emotions? After I have shared with them that this or that element made me feel in that particular way. And it's kind of important because it's like the basis, like from our ego is so strong that when I speak about ego, I don't mean like the psychoanalytical one. I don't mean the Freudian one. I speak about the self, like who you are and who you perceive to be as a person. And that's something that needs to be put in discussion. That's something that needs to be discussed. And that's the reason why probably people are drove to traveling, to visiting different countries, because they want to also have an understanding of different ways of living. And you were asking me about companies, for example, and like the environment. You have to understand something about companies. There is a completely different point of view from someone who is like in a management environment or position, and someone who is like in a lower step of the ladder. And what they see at the top is very different from what they see at the bottom of the ladder. And some of the biggest issues arise when people at the top decide what's good, what's right, and what's just for people who are at the bottom of the ladder. And why is that? Because they don't listen. When we are promoting change inside a company, the first thing we do, literally the first thing, is we listen to them. We listen to what the people want. What's your pain point? Are you happy to be in this company? What's something that would make you happy to work in this company? And it's crazy because when you ask these kind of questions this way, you see the eyes of the person you're talking with. They get so wide because it's probably the first time that someone inside that company asked them these kind of questions. And I was thinking about Ling, what she was saying before, like the fact that she asked other people, how does that make you feel? Like you are watching this piece of art, how does that make you feel? How would you describe it in 3 words? That's something that it's so uncommon in the organizational environment. That's so uncommon to think openly about emotions. And that's something that probably we should be changing. I'm a huge fan of comic books. And the other day I was reading a comic book, a new one that had just come out, and they were speaking about how involving art inside society was what made that society so far advanced. The fact that art was not something that was just painted on canvases. Art was built in every brick, in every algorithm, in everything. So that was something that changed completely. And art is a perfect catalyst for emotion. So I would say that probably if we started from there, from embedding a little bit of emotion, a bit of art into our everyday life, probably we could change a lot of things and change them faster.
Good. On that note, I wanted to bring in also, we have another artist with us today, Adam Fong. He's also coming from Malaysia.
Hello.
He's also a student, so I can definitely identify with the project that Benedetta has just elaborated and explained. And maybe tell us a little bit more about personally how art and your practice as an artist and your sharing inside your community and friends, how that has created maybe empathy or friendships. What is the contribution that you're seeing in actually being an artist and bringing this to the world, bringing stories to the world?
Well, for me, because I haven't actually been painting for too long, I've been painting for like 4 or 5 years, which is a very short period of time. But I think I've sort of been able to connect with people on a deeper level. It's not superficially. I tend to understand them more. And actually, I'm sort of a part of a group on Instagram. It's called the Kenyo group, and we are a group of painters all over the world, and we sort of paint each other. And I think by painting people that I don't know, I sort of find something out about them that I previously would have never imagined knowing if I didn't paint them. And actually, going back to what Benedetta said when she said that young people tend to stray away from expressing their emotions, I think that's quite, I resonate with that a lot, actually, because I don't suffer, but I just have Tourette syndrome, right? And if you don't know what that is, that's a tic, right? It's a vocal and motor tic. So I haven't actually addressed my Tourette's in my art ever, just because I was a bit too scared. I felt, very fragile. But I think listening to what everyone has to say, this has sort of acted as a prompt for me to further not express, but further discover myself, because I've always sort of been very guarded with my Tourette's because, and again, what Angelo said, I'm of the ego, I'm scared of what people may think of it. But I think at the end of it, if I can't really do anything about it, then I might as well just accept it,
Okay. Yeah, this is a new format for Benedetta, no? What do you think? We
Yeah.
could start having, because I think through
Yeah.
painting others, you really start to see them now in a new way. You're actually using other faculties. You're really looking at, to do art well, you have to actually strip away the concepts and actually see what's there. Now, it's what's frequently called beginner's mind, or this kind of idea. And to do that with someone you don't know,
Yeah.
to really see them, or even if you did it with someone you did know, it could be another interesting practice that you really strip away the layers of the concepts of who this person is. It's a very interesting approach. Benedetta, did you have a comment on that?
Absolutely, absolutely. No, what I want to say is that actually, I think that what you said in saying when I paint other people, like I feel more connected to them. I really see like a sort of value creation around it. So like that person is a stranger to you, but you're taking, painting is also about taking the time and cognitive like strength to like I don't know, apply your art on that person and giving your
Yeah.
time and to that person, and that's like such a precious gift. I don't want to sound cheesy, but what I didn't see before is also in this occasion we had to talk with other people that we didn't know. It was such a gift in terms of feeling safe to talk with people about really important topics. But generally to talk to strangers, because what this pandemic did to us was actually to bring us closer to our inner circle instead of like pushing people to go out of the circle, to think out of the box, but also to go out of the box. So I think that's really beautiful, and I can relate it to the experience we had with Culturit. Even if we didn't paint or we didn't produce art, we were actually asked to look at an artwork and, as we said also before, say what that said to us, state in words what that meant to us, what that represented, what emotion it represented. And that was something that I have have done before because I like art, but many other people have never done. So if I go to a friend that is not into art and I show him a painting and I say that's so emotional to me, they're likely to say, but that's like a landscape, but that's they're just looking at the object. And I think art should really be taught in this way through sharing. I really like, by the way, the fact that you're sharing your art with your community so much, because that gives a completely new perspective on it. So yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add. I don't want to...
Actually, I have something interesting to add. I've always been, I mean, art, I have a very odd relationship with my art. I've used it as a tool to keep myself occupied, right? But I've never really used it as a means of expressing myself. I don't think there've been many paintings I've done where I've said, okay, this is what I want to say, and I want to say it with this painting. Most honestly, it's because I've been sort of scared to cross that boundary, because I don't think that art for me needs to say something. I feel like you can make art just to make art, just to keep yourself occupied. But I do think I want to cross that barrier. And with my Tourette's being such a big part of my life, I feel the need to address it in some way in my art. And I've always wanted to, but I've never really known how to. And going back to what you said about communities and sharing my art with communities, I do share my art, with my friends, family on Instagram, but I don't think there's anything inherently personal about it, which I think is one of the things I do want to change, to make my art more introspective and to make it more individualistic, to my sensibilities and my approach and what I have to say.
Cool. Very nice. Ken, what do you think on this as far as making the connection through socializing art or this kind of thing? Is there some kind of is there something you're seeing there or something you're seeing happening in evolving kind of the evolving media landscape together with art, that there's a way to socialize and foster more connection and empathy through these
Well, I mean, one of the issues in terms of dealing with empathy is that there's also a tendency since the Renaissance of having the great man theory of art. We have the art star, and that is completely the opposite of empathy. Picasso is Picasso. Picasso is not empathy. Maybe Guernica is empathy, but that's one painting out of how many hundred? And when we look at portraiture, if I look at Richard Avedon, his Americans is complete, as far as I'm concerned, is completely unempathetic. It's his vision of something, and he completely ignores the people who are there. Now, with Adam and what he's talking about, if he's doing something that's like that, that's a different generation of an approach. And I think that as we're moving forward right now in the past 20, 30 years, there's been more of an idea that art should fit within greater communities outside of just the world of art, and where I think it comes back to being conversational. It comes back to being something that is not fixed around one person. And the more artwork there's a tendency of artwork that's developing that way, while there is still this very strong industry, and the art as an industry, the auction houses, things like this, are still going towards this big man, high price, unempathetic system of art. But I think that there is within the world this tendency to undercut that in some ways. And it's interesting to see people who are actually doing work that actually doesn't even care about the art world anymore. And when I see people like Life Patch in Indonesia, I don't know how much they actually care about if they get shown in a museum, that's cool because someone wants to show them in a museum, but it has nothing to do with what they're doing. They're doing work that is more community-based and actionist based in that way, and that's a completely different approach. And I think that we need to understand that within that there's a whole movement that's moving away from what art has been traditionally.
I think that Adam is doing that fairly well. I mean, he's actually creating art for his own sense of creating, and also then the sense of connecting. Maybe he could share also. I think we have one of the artworks from Adam. He can actually take us through the story of that. So,
all right. So,
through, how this is a bit a moment of fragility, a moment of empathy.
So this was created a couple months ago for school, and so just the context of how I conceptualized the painting itself was not empathetic. It was an assignment. I had guidelines, I had regimens that I had to follow. So I think already from the beginning, I had to detach myself from anything personal, and I had to just complete the assignment. But I think throughout the process of creating the painting, I did have a moment of a bit of an epiphany with my art, right? Because at this point, before I painted this was the largest painting I've ever worked on. And so that in itself was already an obstacle for me, right? I was quite clueless because I didn't really know how to compose such a huge image. And I think what I got out of the process was that I ended up learning more from this one huge painting than you know, 20, 30 other paintings that I've done in the past. So more about the painting. It's actually about the nude, right? And I wanted to sort of recontextualize how we perceive the nude in art, and to stray away from the male gaze and to sort of look at it in a very visceral sense. So it's a very almost Lucian Freud approach to painting, right? Where he just saw the figure as an animal rather than something that could be seductive and sexualized. And I mean, overall, I'm quite proud with this painting, just because of how much I took away from it. So, you know, it was less about saying something, it was more about it was less about saying something and making a statement, and more about what I could learn from it, because I see every painting as an opportunity to learn more about myself and less about less about saying something, you know.
Wei Ling, do you have anything to add on this? Anything from a curator's point of view that you see in the painting that your microphone's off, sorry. Oh.
Yeah. Adam, I mean, you know, we've looked at this work and spoken about this work previously as well, when we last met. No, I think the work is, you know, from a compositional point of view, is, I mean, it's beautifully made. It's a lovely painting, and I think, look, as a young artist, obviously, you're starting out. I mean, you know, and in finding yourself, you know, that you have to sort of, it takes time, right? I mean, I when you're young, you know, your experiences and how you've lived and what you've gone through, the challenges you faced, the things that you want to address. I mean, all this will come, I think, with time. And I think, obviously, at this point, I think, look, as long as you're learning something, as you say, as long as each painting it teaches you something, there's a takeaway, then you're progressing, because you're just putting one step in front of the other and progressing. And I think that's very important for anybody in life. And as an artist, as you gain maturity and you come to a clearer understanding of where you want to go with your work. I mean, earlier you addressed your Tourette's, and you know how that has always been something that you have not really maybe necessarily put into your work. You may or may not want to do that, include it into your practice moving forward. But if it's something that's really sort of close to your heart, and it's something that's, you know, obviously an intrinsic part of your life, and something that it's something that you're overcoming or you're addressing, then it might be something that might permeate into the work that you make, as a way to sort of help you to understand yourself better. I mean, you know, I'm just going to share a quotation by this French installation artist, Benedetta Cecchini. And she says, being an artist means forever healing your own wounds, but at the same time, endlessly exposing them. You know, and I think that really sort of nails it on the head. I mean, a lot of the time, I think a lot of really sort of a lot of artwork that's made from somewhere really deep, it just I think it touches people in many different ways, and many levels of where you can enter the work and how people will react to it. Yeah.
Good. I think we're getting to a time to kind of start to bring things to a close. So I wanted to bring up another topic that has come up recently. It's something we've experienced with the Fragility exhibition, is that it's very difficult, and I think we've touched on it several times in this conversation, things about the ego or being in touch with your emotions, the capacity for people to express and the willingness for people to express. If you talk to a young person today, and maybe Adam, you might comment on this, but when you show your art, if you ask someone what they think, they're usually afraid to respond. They're usually, well, I don't know. And many times the response of the artist is to say, well, you're feeling something. Now, look for that feeling, look for that, that sensation inside and express it. Don't be afraid. There's no wrong or right. So I'd like to end on a note. How do you think we could actually help people and create a safe space for empathy and actually to let them express this feeling and not feel judged or not feel like they're being criticized or the ego is a problem there? But how do we create a safe context, and how do we actually create a way to embed more this idea of art and empathy in people's daily lives? So let's start. Adam, do you want to say something on that? Maybe you can.
Yeah, sure. I think that's a really great question, because for me, I'm still I'm still answering that question myself with my art. I'm still trying to find out how I can show my art to people without being scared and being unapologetic about my art and being able to say something and make a mark. For me, what's helped me put my art out there is just knowing that there's always someone out there who will appreciate what you're doing no matter what. And I think that's so true with so many things, because if you look at music, you know, there's always a niche band that you may not like, but there's always that niche band may have like 5 fans that are very devoted to their music. But even then, you know, so for me, it's just having a very close support group, having a very strong group of friends and family who are there and who will constantly push me. And I guess it's very cheesy, but just knowing that there are people who want to see more of my art is a good enough reason for me to make more art. You know, as much as I want to make it personal, and as much as I want to, you know, say something with my art, I think at the end of it, I'm still an 18-year-old student who's just trying to please someone. You know, that may be my dad, that may be my granddad, myself, but I'm just trying to be the best artist I can, without sounding too pretentious, of course.
Do they freely express their sentiments and expressions when they see your art? Do they immediately respond to it in some way, or do you have to sort of press them a little bit and say, hey, what is it? You know, what do you really feel when you look at this?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that I even was invited to this talk was already a big thing in the family, because everyone's like, oh my God, you're actually in a talk with like all these people. Honestly, I don't really seek approval, but I do seek opinions. I do seek their thoughts. And obviously, you know, I do have people saying, oh, I don't like this, I don't like that, I don't like that part of the painting. But I tend to just try to listen to myself, and also because what Ling said in a previous conversation, you know, she told me that I'm really just my own critic, and I think that resonates a lot with where I'm at in my journey, I guess, right? Because for a long time I've just been listening to other people, and that's great, but sometimes I tend to block everything off and just listen to what I have to say, and so I'm straying away a bit, but it's about balancing. I think when I balance my opinions with other people's opinions, is when I get the best of both worlds, personally.
Yeah, we all have a negativity bias, and so if 10 people can tell you it's great work, and then one person tells you, you know, they don't like it, you're going to hear the one person that says they don't like it, right? So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's definitely something that is coming through. Let's move to Benedetta. Do you have anything to add? Like, how can we help people? Give tools, help them feel. We created a really beautiful, safe space with the Culturit project.
Exactly. Yeah, actually that's what I was gonna say when you asked the question before. I really believe that more places like this one, so more occasions to exchange opinions in such an interesting way. You know, here we had a psychologist, we had a curator, we had a professor who is also doing a lot into the art world, and an artist and student, and a student myself. So having more chances to really demonstrate how many links can exist between sectors and fields that seem so far away, and especially when art is the connector, I think that's really powerful, because art in the end already has this kind of empathy inside it. as a means of expression. So that in this sense, I think art can really teach something to the other sectors, and having more occasions like this one to really hear people's opinion on art can help both worlds. So both the world of art and the world of business and academic and students like myself.
Thank you so much, Benedetta. Looking at Angelo, I have other friends of mine that are actually running courses using things like poetry to bring people together, and they're seeing in businesses as a strategy, just getting people to communicate is a huge step. Getting people to identify, be on the same level, feel the same things, empathize, and connect is a huge step in the right direction. Do you see strategies for using art in your next projects or to create these sort of connections?
Absolutely, yes. And I can tell you about something that struck me yesterday, literally yesterday. We are working on how to involve people, how to get people to be more involved with cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is something that no one likes. I think not even people who work in the cybersecurity field actually like cybersecurity. It's as far away as possible from art. And so we asked ourselves, how can we get them there? And the answer we got to is, let's create a narrative frame. Let's create a story. Let's share a story with them that talks about it, but doesn't really talk about it. So let's create something that will resonate with them, that will also move them on the emotional side, because we're sharing a story. We're not sharing data or best practices or procedures. And so, to give you a concrete example, we're thinking of recording short stories and audio recordings of short stories of people who actually are telling their experience with cybersecurity, of when they lost the pictures of their grandchildren because of a cybersecurity attack, of when their computer got frozen off and they lost their information to travel and get to meet their parents. So it's that kind of story that we're sharing, the kind of story that moves people. And we're doing it for something that, again, it's so far away. And it's important to move people and to start sharing these kind of stories. So if I have one takeaway that I would like to share with you is start sharing stories, because they are important. And no matter the frame you decide to share the story with, may it be a painting, may it be in writing, may it be a song, whatever the medium, but just start sharing your story. And leveraging also something that Ken said before, start also welcoming the critique. And critique is not negative feedback, it's just different points of view that you can also integrate in what you are doing and what you will do next. So there's definitely a space, and the best thing is that it's an untapped space. It's right now a big space that no one is looking at, and there's space for everybody.
Yeah, I think there's some great points there. I mean, the fact that there is no objective one reality. There's so many different subjective realities that the closest thing we can get to an objective reality is actually these subject impressions and ideas all converging and coming together and actually being able to somehow have a dialogue together. And that's where it becomes really interesting. But I'll pass the word to Ken to maybe close out. What are your thoughts thinking about new media, thinking about art?
Well, what I think is interesting with what Angelo was saying just now is that the key to what he's talking about is the idea of narrative. Yeah. That it's the idea of storytelling and understanding through a narrative. And a lot of what we're dealing these days in, especially in time-based media, be it on the web, be it projections, be it whatever, is this idea of being engaged with things through narrative, through an experience that comes over time and is constructed in a way to allow us to follow along and feel, and we gain feeling because we feel that we experience it as it unfolds in front of us. At the same time, we become that character. And that idea of narrative is so fundamental to all of this. And I think that's very, very strong element of what we're thinking about in terms of empathy. And then in terms of how do we create zones of that, I think an important thing is to rethink the institutions that we have. Right now we have the museum. A lot of art institutions are made to make things seem so precious as to kind of scare people from being near it. One of my favorite stories is when I was, I think, 13 years old. I was in a museum, and they had this work. It was a kinetic work of art. So it had these metal discs that had opposite colors. You run your hand across it on a spring, and it's in a museum. And of course, what is next to the museum? What is next to it in the museum? A huge sign that says "Do not touch," because that's what the institution says. Because the institution says this is valuable. Therefore, if people touch it, it'll be destroyed. But if no one touches it, we never get to actually see what the work is as intended by the artist, and we have never experienced what that work is. So we need to rethink the institutions in terms of how can they allow us to be able to share those stories, share those things, that and not feel that this thing is so precious that we are afraid to confront it.
I think it's fantastic. I think the stories and the narratives, I think we all have stories that we can identify with. They aren't actually our stories. They're collective stories much of the time that we identify with or seem to be identifying with at the moment. And then we can let go of, or we can embrace, we can become closer to them or farther away from them. But the main thing is by seeing what's happening now, being new ways of actually being able to see and explore what we're feeling. And so with that comment, I want to give the last word to Ling, that if we're really looking at art and empathy, and it starts with the first steps of actually emotion, feeling those emotions, and the impact that we can actually feel those emotions intensely through art. Can you say something there about how we can create a space for people to actually express that, and come back to this more of this openness to embrace art in a way that's more connecting in some senses?
Well, gosh, putting me in the spot here, Chris. I think really, okay. Let's not. I'm not saying this because we're obviously on this platform with the Fragility exhibition in relation to that, but I do think that was really that is a good way. The physical and the digital exhibition was really quite a good bridge, as I said earlier, to doing this. But yeah, I think just by having that sort of a platform, it is a space where people don't feel intimidated. They don't feel they're being judged. You just go in there in your own time, your own space. There's no one around. You can watch those videos at your own. You can watch the videos. You can stop it. You can go have a drink. You can come back. You can continue. I mean, I think that exhibition, the format that you guys put together for the Fragility exhibition, allows people an introduction to looking at art, and not feel pressured, I think, in some ways. So, but what I would do is perhaps in the interactions, I would perhaps allow people more freedom to express how they feel about what they see and what they their takeaways from that. I mean, obviously, on a physical realm, I mean, in the galleries, we're constantly grappling with how to engage with local audiences. I mean, in Malaysia, you must remember, we're a country where art is not really part of the education curriculum. So you don't have people coming who've had an art education, who understand the history of art, who understand why artists make works, and there's no sort of tradition of sort of going to museums and like spending time with art. That has not happened here. So we find that a lot of people who are interested in art, who are coming through it's really sort of starting with them at ground zero and giving them an introduction into how to look at art. I mean, this is talking about Malaysia, which is great. I mean, we'd be happy to play that role. I mean, that should really be the role of institutions. But it's engagement on a very sort of on a much more sort of preliminary level. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think, as Angelo said earlier and in Ken's discussion, the narratives, the stories, is the way you make people feel when they look at something. If you tell them a story and you inspire them with how you make them feel. So at the end of the day, it is about that. It is about instilling an emotion or feeling in someone, and that's what they'll take away, and that's what they will remember.
Okay. I think that's fantastic. I think grounding yourself in some way in a space where you feel safe, you're in front of art, or you're actually experiencing it and able to actually take it in is something that's key. Then actually understanding and recognizing a bit some of the things we talked about with Angelo, being able to identify those emotions that are going on inside you is the first step, is what we've said. No, putting aside things like the ego and then taking it a step further where we can start to empathize and really even have compassion, and those kind of compassion and those emotions that if we can actually interpret in the right ways, we can understand our own behavior and put things more into action and actually act in the world, in our connections, in our relationships. And I think excellent comments. Are there any last words that anyone wants to add to close out? I think it's beautifully done. We've looked at art and empathy from many different perspectives. So from the educational point of view and the artistic and cultural point of view, from the psychology, and also bringing in a little bit of neuroscience, light neuroscience, and the success of the Culturit project. I'd invite all of you to go onto the YouTube channel and have a look at that. There's a series of 6 different episodes. With that, is there any last closing things that we didn't, stones we didn't uncover or turn over to explore?
No, I would say just a big thank to everyone. It was a great occasion of exchange. I really appreciated it.
No, I enjoyed this very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all
for having
you.
us.
profoundly for a very deep discussion. It's wonderful. We're definitely going to do this format again. I think the passing around and kind of the finding the links between the different disciplines and the different communities is fundamental. It makes the conversation so much more interesting. We can contrast the different views. So a new trial format, the kaleidoscope. Love it, and we'll keep working and refining this idea together with you as we grow. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Like that.
Thank you, and make sure for everyone, just to anyone out in the audience, make sure you go and do visit Fragility, Fragilita. That's at particle.art/fragility. So with that, thank you all for your participation and being part of this first episode.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.